In this documentary, we peel back the layers of one of the most enduring legends of our time, Bigfoot. We begin not with sensational claims, but with cultural memory. Stories that predate modern science and describe a creature known by many names: Sasquatch, Yeti, Yowie, Almas. From there, we examine some of the most compelling cases in cryptozoological history. An alleged abduction in 1924. Over 10,000 eyewitnesses across the globe. Biological footprints with primate traits not found in humans. Audio recordings analyzed by military linguists. And visual footage that's still defying explanation after more than half a century. The mystery of Bigfoot is often framed as a matter of belief. But in truth, it's not a question of belief at all. It's a question of evidence. And the evidence goes back much farther than most people realize. Long before the name Bigfoot appeared in headlines, before plaster casts and grainy video footage, there were stories deeply rooted in the cultures of the indigenous peoples of North America. Not as folklore, not as myths, but as living memory passed down through generations. Across the forests, mountains, and vast remote wilderness of what we now call Canada and the United States, Indigenous tribes have shared accounts of large, hairy, human-like beings that walked upright, kept to the shadows, and lived beyond the edges of what we call civilization. In these traditions, the creature wasn't a novelty or a hoax. It was a known presence, sometimes feared, sometimes respected, but always acknowledged. In the Pacific Northwest, for example, the Coast Salish people have long spoken of the Saskats, a name that would eventually evolve into Sasquatch. The creature was described not only as real, but as intelligent and powerful, living deep in the forests, avoiding human contact, and rarely seen except by accident or in moments of spiritual importance. The St. Siles Nation in British Columbia still holds the Sasquatch as a guardian of nature, a being not to be hunted or mocked, but understood and respected. Their oral histories describe encounters that match many modern sightings: enormous footprints, powerful howls, and sudden disappearances. In the forests of Northern California, the Hupa and Yurok tribes have shared stories for centuries of a creature they refer to as Oma, or the Night People, figures who watch from the trees, communicate with each other, and leave behind massive tracks too large for any known animal. Even far from the Pacific coast, across the plains and into the Appalachian regions, tribes like the Cherokee, Choctaw, and Lakota have their own names and descriptions, many of them astonishingly consistent in detail. Bipedal movement, great height, a musky odor, and a strong awareness of humans. What's remarkable is not just the number of tribes with these stories, but the consistency between them. Separated by thousands of miles and diverse cultures, the descriptions remain strikingly aligned, and none of these tribes borrowed their beliefs from Western cryptozoology. These stories are far older. In some traditions, Sasquatch is not just an animal, but a spiritual being, a symbol of the boundary between nature and mankind, and a reminder of the wild world that still exists beyond the reach of roads and cities. Dismissed by skeptics as legend, these oral histories are in fact some of the oldest witness testimony on record. Testimony that predates modern media, yet describes the same creature captured by trail cams and thermal drones today. The history of Bigfoot doesn't start with a viral video or a tabloid headline. It starts with the First Nations, the elders, and the stories that were never meant to entertain, but to warn, to explain, and to pass on what they knew to be true. In 1929, the oral traditions of Indigenous North America began to reach a broader audience, not through folklore, but through the lens of an ethnologist who took them seriously. J.W. Burns, a Canadian schoolteacher and government Indian agent, spent years living among the St. Siles people of British Columbia. In his writings, he documented their descriptions of a powerful, elusive being known as Saskets, a name that, through Burns' work, would be anglicized into Sasquatch. and eventually spark one of North America's most enduring mysteries. J.W. Burns stated, "The Sasquatch are as real as you and me. They live in the mountains and come down sometimes to visit our people. They are shy, but powerful." Decades later, this reverence still holds. In a 2009 interview, Chief Les George, a respected elder of the Sensales Nation, echoed the same understanding that had been shared with Burns nearly a century earlier. "The Sasquatch has always been here, long before the white man came. We know where they live, and we respect their land. They are another tribe, another people." Marion Smith, an anthropologist working in the Pacific Northwest, echoed a similar account from Indigenous sources. She documented their warnings clearly. "Our people know of Tsemekwes. He is the watcher of the woods. He can disappear when he wants to. He is not to be hunted or angered." These statements weren't metaphor. They weren't legend. They were spoken with the calm certainty of people who had lived alongside these beings, not as fantasy, but as reality. Not all Bigfoot encounters are fleeting glimpses in the trees. Some are far more intimate and far more disturbing. In the summer of 1924, a Canadian prospector named Albert Ostman ventured into the remote wilderness of British Columbia in search of gold. He was experienced and familiar with the land. Ostman claimed he was abducted by a family of Sasquatch. According to his account, "I was awakened by something picking me up," Ostman later said in a taped interview. "I was half asleep at first, and I did not remember where I was. As I began to get my wits together, I remembered I was on this prospecting trip, and in my sleeping bag. Whatever was carrying him, it was strong and alive." He described feeling his body rise with each step, as the creature, breathing heavily and coughing, carried him for miles. When the journey finally ended, he found himself in a secluded canyon, surrounded by 4 large, hairy beings. He wasn't unconscious. He wasn't drugged. For 6 days, he observed them in detail. There was an adult male, massive and intimidating, who Ostman said guarded the entrance to the canyon. A female, who prepared what seemed to be plant-based food. And 2 younger ones, smaller in stature but clearly related. Ostman watched their behaviors, their routines, even how they communicated through gesture and expression. He never described them as savage. If anything, he said they were cautious, curious, but not hostile. Eventually, he managed to escape by tricking the elder male with a pouch of snuff tobacco, which caused a violent reaction and created enough confusion for Ostman to flee the canyon and find his way back to civilization. He didn't tell a soul for 33 years. Why? Because, as he put it, no one would believe him. It wasn't until 1957, after decades of Bigfoot chatter began surfacing in newspapers and radio broadcasts, that Ostman came forward. His testimony was recorded and documented in detail, and despite repeated questioning, he never changed a word. "I know what I saw," he insisted until the day he died. "And it was no bear. These creatures exist. I spent almost a week among them." Skeptics, understandably, point to the lack of physical proof. But researchers note something interesting. Ostman's story came years before the term Bigfoot was even coined, and decades before cultural descriptions of the creature became standardized. And yet the details he described, the size, behavior, appearance, and terrain, line up remarkably well with modern reports from hundreds of eyewitnesses. If it was fiction, it was extraordinarily consistent with decades of future accounts. Whether true or not, the Ostman case remains one of the most detailed and controversial alleged Sasquatch encounters ever recorded. It wasn't a blurry photo. It wasn't a shadow in the trees. It was 6 days in their world. For some, the mystery of Bigfoot comes down to a single dismissive phrase: "Where's the proof?" But in any investigation, whether legal, scientific, or criminal, eyewitness testimony is a form of evidence. And when that testimony repeats across time, region, and background, something bigger begins to take shape. To date, over 10,000 eyewitness reports have been filed describing encounters with Bigfoot-like beings in North America alone. That figure doesn't include similar accounts from other corners of the world. Reports of the Yeti in the Himalayas, the Yowie in Australia, the Yeren in China, or the Almas in Mongolia. These creatures go by many names, but their core descriptions remain astonishingly consistent. And what's equally compelling is who's reporting them. These aren't just campers and curiosity seekers. Among the thousands of accounts are testimonies from law enforcement officers, park rangers, military veterans, biologists, judges, pilots, and lifelong hunters. People who are trained to observe, trained to stay calm, and often hesitant to come forward at all, for fear of being mocked. One such person was Dr. John Bindernagel, a Canadian wildlife biologist with decades of experience studying large mammals. He spent much of his later life researching and defending the existence of Sasquatch, not based on legend, but on tracks, behavioral patterns, and first-hand observation. In one account, Bindernagel described, "I saw an upright figure standing in a fence row, gently rocking from side to side. It was fairly obscured by vegetation, but I could see a shoulder and what appeared to be a head. It eventually got spooked by our presence and retreated into the forest. But as it walked, its large arm came into view, swinging backwards." He would go on to publish multiple books and scientific papers defending the possibility of an undiscovered primate species, arguing that the repeated patterns in sightings, sounds, and tracks were too consistent to ignore. Another powerful account comes from retired U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Todd Nice, who in 1993 was conducting a routine explosives training exercise in the Oregon wilderness. He and his unit were far from populated areas when he spotted something across a ravine. Between us was a ravine populated with 8 to 12-year-old Douglas fir and hemlock. At a distance of several hundred meters, I could not make out the facial features or gender, but there was no doubt that what I was looking at were not humans. He reported seeing 3 beings, large, upright, and moving with clear coordination. Nice now dedicates his time to Sasquatch research, helping others come forward with their own encounters. And then there's Officer Chris Miller, a North Carolina police officer who had his own inexplicable moment while patrolling the woods in the early 2000s. What began as distant, incomprehensible whispers soon escalated into something much more real. The whispers were clear, but in a language I couldn't understand. When I shined my flashlight, I saw a tall, dark figure standing just beyond the beam.
To say that I froze. Not like in a fear type way, but yeah, I was scared, but I just froze because I did not want it to see me. There was never one moment in my mind that it was ever a human, period. Never.
Miller held his ground, but the figure vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind no tracks, but a memory that he says still haunts him. These stories are just a handful among thousands, but they serve as an important reminder. This is not fringe speculation. These are trained professionals, outdoorsmen, and scientists. And while not every sighting can be verified, the sheer consistency of detail, geography, and emotional impact tells us something that data alone cannot. These aren't blurry-eyed campers or teenagers around a fire. These are people who know the difference between myth and something that shouldn't exist, but does. If Sasquatch is a hoax, then it's the most persistent, anatomically accurate, and geographically inexplicable hoax in modern history. To date, thousands of footprint casts have been collected across North America and beyond. Many of them in extremely remote wilderness, where the odds of discovery are so low it would make no sense for a prankster to go through the trouble. And yet people do find them. So what makes these footprints so convincing? It starts with repeated anatomical features, patterns not seen in human tracks, but found consistently in primate anatomy. One of the most significant indicators is the mid-tarsal break, a flexible joint in the middle of the foot common in great apes like gorillas and chimpanzees, but absent in modern humans. While our feet have an arched structure, these tracks suggest a flat, hinge-like flexibility that allows the foot to adapt to rough terrain. Some of the most compelling casts show human-like footprints, but at inhuman proportions. Prints measuring up to 18 inches long, showing dynamic toe movement, deep pressure ridges, and even asymmetrical steps, details that point to living, flexible feet, not hard molds. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, a physical anthropologist and expert on primate locomotion, has spent years analyzing these tracks. His research points to traits that suggest weight shifting, terrain adaptation, and biological structure, including how the toes grip more firmly on sloped or slippery surfaces, but relax on flat ground. These are movements no wooden or rubber hoax foot could replicate. Some casts go further, showing dermal ridges, the fine skin lines found on fingers and the soles of our feet. These ridges are also present in gorillas, chimpanzees, and, apparently, in Sasquatch. They're incredibly difficult to fake. Police fingerprint expert Jimmy Chilcutt reviewed several casts and said, "If someone faked these, they should be forging money instead. These aren't just broad shapes carved into foam. They show wear, weight distribution, and even injury." In some rare cases, researchers have tracked specific foot injuries, a warped heel, a toe deformation, only to find matching prints years later in the same region, showing the injury's progression and healing through natural callousing. A hoaxer would need not just deep anatomical knowledge, but foresight and access over years to pull that off. Dr. Grover Krantz, another renowned anthropologist, was blunt in his analysis. "You can't fake pressure ridges." He was referring to the subtle compression patterns in the soil, signs that a real, soft, living foot pressed down, shifted weight, and moved forward with force. Of course, there are fakes out there, some of them laughable. Photos exist of crude wooden Sasquatch feet being held up proudly. But those obvious forgeries do not explain the best evidence collected under controlled circumstances by trained scientists in untouched wilderness. And this isn't just a North American phenomenon. In 1951, mountaineer Eric Shipton was scaling the Himalayas when he stumbled across a line of 13-inch humanoid tracks at over 19,000 feet above sea level. The photos made headlines around the world. The prints were deeply embedded in the snow, clearly fresh, and showed a broad foot with an offset big toe, a trait found in some non-human primates. Shipton was baffled. "Nobody goes up to 19,000 feet just to make a joke," he said. And he was right. These weren't just oddities. They were structured, deliberate, biological footprints, appearing in terrain so inhospitable that faking them would be both impractical and senseless. This type of footprint evidence, when evaluated seriously, builds a consistent picture, not just of something big, but of something real, something adapted to survive, to move silently across rugged terrain, and to leave behind traces, even if only for those paying close enough attention. If a creature like Bigfoot exists, and it's as elusive as witnesses claim, then perhaps one of the best chances we have of detecting it isn't through sight, but through sound. Over the years, researchers have collected a remarkable range of audio recordings that defy easy explanation. These aren't distant echoes or wildlife calls misheard in the dark. These are clear, unsettling vocalizations recorded in remote wilderness areas, some of which have been analyzed by linguists, sound engineers, and skeptics alike, and still leave more questions than answers. Among the most famous are the Sierra Sounds, recorded in the 1970s by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Armed with a microphone and a cassette recorder, the men were hoping for proof of movement. What they captured instead were bizarre, guttural voices, sometimes aggressive, sometimes conversational. The pitch variations, intensity, and speed were unlike anything native to the area, and far beyond what a human could fake without specialized equipment. Despite online jokes and casual claims that "my dog sounds like that" or "my teenage son hoots like that all the time," serious analysts have taken a different view. Scott Nelson, a retired U.S. Navy cryptologic linguist, reviewed the Sierra sounds and offered a chilling conclusion. The language elements in the Sierra sounds appear to follow linguistic patterns, not random animal noise. He wasn't just guessing. Nelson, trained in identifying structured communication, believed the recordings captured a real language, spoken by something non-human. And the Sierra sounds are just the beginning.
I played it over again. And over, and my son said, "Dad, what are you doing? What's wrong with you?" I said, "Son, there's a language here, and that is not a human being."
There's also the Ohio Howl, a now iconic recording made by an anonymous witness deep in the rural Midwest. Captured from what must have been hundreds of yards away, the howl is so loud, so haunting, that it triggers distant dogs to start barking in the background. The sound rises and falls like a siren, but sirens don't echo from the center of uninhabited forest. The howl builds, sustains, then drops back into silence, and listeners are left with chills. Researchers and independent explorers have since collected hundreds of vocal samples, including whoops, howls, growls, rapid chatter, and what sounds eerily like whispered dialogue. The patterns are consistent. The tone is always too low, too wide-ranging, or too fast for the average human vocal range. And they tend to come from regions with a history of Bigfoot sightings. If it's not a person, and not a known animal, then the question becomes much harder to dismiss. In many of these recordings, it's not just the sound that alarms researchers, it's the response. Nearby animals, dogs, elk, even coyotes, go silent, flee, or begin vocalizing as if they've heard something foreign, as if something larger than them has entered their territory. For skeptics, audio has often been dismissed as inconclusive. But for those who've spent time analyzing the frequencies, measuring the decibels, and comparing the patterns, this vocal evidence stands as one of the most compelling categories of Bigfoot research. Because it's hard to hoax something you can't see, and harder still to fake something that speaks back. One of the most common arguments from skeptics is simple. If Bigfoot is real, why don't we have good video? But here's the truth. We do. Perhaps the most famous and enduring piece of footage ever captured is the Patterson-Gimlin film, shot in 1967 in Bluff Creek, Northern California. The short clip shows a large, upright, hairy figure striding across a sandbar before briefly turning its head toward the camera. Decades later, no footage, real or fabricated, has matched it in anatomical detail, natural biomechanics, and sheer mystery. Despite countless attempts to discredit the film, it remains remarkably resilient. Experts in primatology, wildlife biology, and even Hollywood special effects have weighed in, and many agree this isn't a man in a costume. The figure's movement is fluid, powerful, and distinctly non-human. The muscle groups visible in the legs, shoulders, and back, including gluteal and hamstring flexion, respond naturally to the gait in ways that prosthetics simply couldn't achieve, especially in the 1960s. Hollywood creature effects veteran Bill Munns studied the footage extensively. His verdict? Every muscle group, the gluteals, the hamstrings, the shoulder rolls, all of it is visible and authentic. This isn't a costume. Even now, photo archivist Todd Gatewood is restoring the original film frame by frame from high-quality sources, revealing anatomical subtleties lost in the low-resolution versions found online. With modern tools, we're finally seeing the Patterson footage for what it truly is. one of the most important unexplained pieces of wildlife footage ever recorded. Of course, the Patterson-Gimlin film is just the beginning. Throughout the decades, countless other compelling videos have emerged. Some blurry, others shockingly clear once examined closely. The Paul Freeman footage from the early 1990s shows a large, dark figure walking through the forest. At first glance, it may seem typical, but when researchers returned to the site, they measured the tree the figure brushed past. It stood over 16 feet tall, making the creature in the footage well over 8 feet tall.
Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
Then there's the Provo Canyon footage from Utah, filmed by a group of teenagers. While hiking, they spotted something in the woods, an indistinct shape in the brush. But then, it stood up. The figure that emerged was massive, taller, thicker, and broader than any human or bear. The teens' reactions were raw and unrehearsed. They ran.
Yeah, you probably should be too close to it. It's kinda cool though. Let's go.
With dozens, possibly hundreds of other similar clips available, the conversation shouldn't be whether footage exists. It should be why so many people are quick to dismiss it. Yes, hoaxes exist. No serious researcher denies that. But to lump every recording, every frame of video, every testimony of movement into the fake category, without analysis, without context, isn't scientific skepticism. It's willful ignorance. Not every video shows the creature clearly. Not every photo is world-shaking. But taken as a whole, the archive is growing. And with it, the possibility that we've been watching real evidence all along, just waiting for someone to take it seriously. You ever get that feeling like you're being watched? Not in the city, not in a crowd, but somewhere quiet, isolated, where every sound echoes and the silence feels thick. That's what one man felt deep in the forests of North America. He wasn't out there for anything special, no research, no hunting, just a breath of fresh air, far away from the static of city life. The trees were tall, the forest floor soft with moss. Birds chirped, sunlight filtered gently through the pine branches. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. The man had stopped for a sip of water when something shifted at the edge of his vision. He turned slowly, and that's when he saw it. A figure, large, dark, upright.
It's crazy.
It moved between the trees like it belonged there, not crawling, not hunched, but walking, with long, heavy steps. Its shoulders were massive, arms dangling unnaturally low, swaying slightly as it moved. It was tall, thick, covered head to toe in coarse black hair. But what struck him most wasn't the size. It was the way it moved. There was no panic, no fear. It walked calmly, confidently, like it knew this place, like it owned it, and maybe like it knew it was being watched. The hiker barely breathed. He raised his phone, hit record. You can see it in the clip. The creature doesn't turn, doesn't speed up. It just keeps walking, straight through dense underbrush, like none of it matters. Almost as if it's leading him or warning him. The man whispered to himself, "This isn't right. I'm not supposed to see this." And maybe he wasn't. For years, legends have whispered about creatures in these woods. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, forest giants. but they always vanish before we get proof. Every photo is blurry, every video is shaky, every witness is left with more questions than answers. But what if it's not just one? What if they're out there, many of them, watching us from the shadows, walking the same trails, hearing every twig we step on, smelling us long before we know they're there? Every year, hikers disappear, campers vanish, some are found, most aren't. And the forest never says a word. So next time you're alone in the woods and the wind dies, the birds go quiet, and your gut tells you to turn back, maybe listen, because whatever's watching you might not be human. It was a quiet ride through the deep woods of Massachusetts. The kind of solo escape most mountain bikers dream about. No crowds, no traffic, just the sound of tires crunching over dirt and the wind moving through trees older than any town nearby. It was 2015, and this rider, armed with a GoPro, was ready to capture his day in the wild. The forest was thick, branches hung low. Sunlight barely pierced through the dense green above. It was peaceful, untouched, the kind of place that hides more than it reveals. Then, it happened. The rider slowed down. He'd seen something. Just off the trail, between the trees, movement, small, quick, but not in a way he could explain. It wasn't a deer, it wasn't a rabbit, it wasn't anything he'd seen on these trails before. It moved differently. He pulled over. The GoPro picked up the tension in his breath, the way the camera began to shake slightly in his hands. His voice dropped to a whisper. And then, a flash. A figure darted between the trunks, covered in hair, low to the ground, upright. It didn't crawl, it didn't hop. It ran, on two legs, like a child running through the woods, but wild. He panned the camera, tried to zoom in, but the thing had already vanished into the undergrowth, moving like it knew the land, knew how to hide, how to disappear before anyone got a clear look. Some might laugh and say it was a baby bear, but when you watch the clip, when you pause it, frame by frame, you see something else. The posture, the proportion, the strange grace in its movement, something that doesn't add up. And that's what unsettled him the most, because if it was a baby, where was the mother? For a moment he just stood there. The trail he'd loved for years now felt strange, unfamiliar, like the woods weren't just trees and moss anymore, but something alive, watching, deciding. Massachusetts has always carried its share of wilderness legends, but this was real, caught on camera, brief as it was. So the next time you're alone on a forest trail, breathing in the silence, surrounded by nothing but woods, keep your eyes open, because if that was a young Sasquatch, then something much bigger is out there too, and it's probably not far behind. British Columbia, the Tantalus Range, remote, jagged, icy. It was July 2nd, 2020, a clear summer day in the high alpine. Wildlife biologist Miles Lamont was hiking near Squamish, Canada, when he noticed something unusual.
We're on top of Tricuni Peak, and pretty sure there's just Sasquatch down there.
Oh my god.
I can't really see it very well. There's this little black dot walking in the middle of the snow, in the middle of nowhere.
High above the valley floor, near 7,000 feet elevation, a tiny black figure moved across a snowy ridge. From that distance, it looked like a speck. But it wasn't still. It was climbing. Fast, upright, deliberate. Lamont caught it on film, puzzled. "If that's a human," he said.
Why would he walk up that way? If that was a human, why would you walk up that ridge or that snow line? Why would you not just go straight down?
Why would they be walking up that ridge? No one hikes uphill into the cold unless they have a reason. And certainly not without gear. No backpacks, no snowshoes, no visible equipment. Just a lone, dark figure moving across deep snow as if the terrain didn't matter. Lamont, an experienced outdoorsman and wildlife biologist, had seen plenty of backcountry travelers.
Good thing we brought beers. We could lure him over here. Dude, that's bizarre.
This wasn't like any of them. His voice in the footage carries a strange mix of curiosity and tension. He even jokes, maybe if we had a few beers, we could lure him over. But he's unsettled. This was not quite like any of those, he later said. It was a bit different. The video stirred up waves online. Debates erupted. Was it a person? Or something else?
We're in the middle of nowhere right now. I don't know how high we are, but we're probably close to 7,000 feet. 6,500 maybe.
That's when a man named Peter Tennant, or Ridgewalker Pete, stepped forward. He claimed the figure was him. A solo hiker from White Rock, BC, Pete said he had been in the area that same summer. No pack, no snowshoes, just an emergency locator. He was exploring. Simple, harmless. But then, the timeline unraveled.
But I mean, he's hiking through snow like it's his job. And where the hell is he going? I mean, there's nowhere to go that way.
Pete claimed he was on Tricuni Mountain during the last week of July. Lamont's footage, dated July 2nd, 3 weeks apart, different locations, same range, but not the same day. So if it wasn't Pete, who or what was it? A figure, alone, high in the snow, without gear, moving quickly where few dare to tread. In the deep wilderness of British Columbia, far from roads and watchers, maybe legends walk the ridgelines after all. And sometimes, we catch them on camera.
I don't...
Every once in a while, a piece of footage surfaces that stops even seasoned investigators in their tracks. And this was one of those moments. The Rocky Mountain Sasquatch Organization, one of the most recognized groups in North America, dedicated to researching and documenting Bigfoot sightings, received a sighting video from a man named John. What John and his team captured on camera has since stirred not only curiosity, but serious conversation among cryptid researchers and skeptics alike. Using a spotting telescope and a handheld camera, John was stationed at roughly 4,200 feet elevation on Utah's Wasatch Front Range when he filmed something extraordinary. Far above them, nearly a mile higher, at an altitude around 9,000 feet, a large, bipedal creature was seen sprinting up a steep, snow-covered slope, with ease. To truly grasp the scale, imagine this: over 3 miles of visual zoom distance, over 5,000 feet of vertical climb. And yet the figure wasn't trudging or slipping. It was running fluidly with long strides, seemingly unbothered by wind or the 90 inches of snow underfoot. No skis, no snowshoes, no poles, just 2 legs and momentum.
We were sent the following footage by a person that goes by John. It was filmed on one of the mountain peaks along the Wasatch Front mountain range. The guys that filmed it were down in the valley, 4,200 feet elevation, and zoomed in on a peak, 9,000 feet elevation. They did their best to film this creature running horizontal, then vertical up the steep, snow-swept mountainside using a spotting telescope and holding the lens of the camera up to the viewfinder. It was almost a mile higher than the guys filming it, around 5,200 feet higher.
To put it in perspective, the narrator introduces a comparison shot. A man named Matthew Anderson, 6 feet tall, attempting to hike through just 18 inches of snow. He struggles, he staggers. Each step is a battle against the snowpack. But the creature? It moves like it's walking on solid ground. And then, the footage gets even more compelling. As the original clip is stabilized and replayed in slow motion, you can see the figure in full view. The backdrop is pure white, the creature a dark silhouette gliding across the frame. One of the men filming gasps, his voice filled with shock and disbelief. They weren't out hunting for Bigfoot. They didn't expect this. Their reaction is genuine.
This guy is 6 feet tall. This is how a large man looks hiking in 18 inches of snow. Now compare it to this creature running in 90 inches of snowpack. Just amazing footage. Big difference. I hope you guys enjoy. Keep on watching.
News of the footage spread quickly. Viewers asked the obvious question: had anyone gone out to investigate the site? Days later, a helicopter pilot who had seen the footage flew over the exact area, and what he found added another layer to the mystery. A trackway, huge footprints with long strides, each print placed directly in front of the other, like someone walking a tightrope. This track formation is consistent with many historic Bigfoot reports when the creature is said to move at high speed. Skeptics might say it's a trick of the light, a prank, or just a hiker in heavy gear. But the terrain, the distance, the gait, and the environmental challenge all beg to differ. Whether it's a hoax, a coincidence, or the clearest footage to date of something we've never been able to prove, one thing is certain. What John captured on that snowy peak wasn't ordinary, and it might just be the closest we've ever come to seeing Bigfoot before it vanished. Some encounters come by chance. Others are caught only because a camera happened to be rolling. But every now and then, what that camera captures is enough to challenge everything we think we know. In the early morning hours of May 30th, 2024, a Canadian truck driver was headed to an empty industrial site in Alberta to pick up equipment. It was routine work, no traffic, no people, just the hum of his engine and the empty road stretching through the wilderness. But what happened next turned that simple assignment into one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in recent cryptid history. The truck's dash camera was rolling, as it always does. At first, nothing seemed off, but as the truck approached the entrance to the site, the driver noticed something standing still at the edge of the tree line. A dark, towering figure. He didn't pay it much attention at first. Out there, you expect the occasional moose or bear to wander close. But when he got out of the vehicle to start loading cargo, it became clear. Standing perfectly still, just yards from the truck, was a figure estimated at 11 feet tall. Massive, wide-shouldered, covered in dark, rough fur. It didn't move. It just watched. The driver froze for a split second, and then bolted back into the cab, slamming the door shut in a panic. His dashcam kept recording, and that's what gave us the footage we have now. In those seconds, as the headlights swept across the tree line, the creature's full form became visible. Upright, clearly bipedal, not running, not hiding, just standing there, like it belonged. The driver left the site immediately. No one would have blamed him. In the days that followed, trail cameras were installed across the site to monitor the area. But it didn't reappear. Not there anyway. However, just months later, 20 miles away, a similar figure was reported by a local landowner. Tall, dark, fast-moving. Coincidence? Maybe. But what that dash cam recorded remains one of the clearest digital sightings to date. And what's most disturbing is how calm the creature seemed, like it knew it was being watched, and didn't care. So the question stands, was this a lucky break in Sasquatch research, or just a moment of eerie wilderness coincidence? Whatever it was, it's out there, and that footage is very real. 12 years ago, what began as a sweet camping trip in Utah's scenic Provo Canyon turned into one of the most unsettling encounters ever caught on camera. The area, nestled between Squaw Peak and the Little Rock Canyon overlook, is known for its remote beauty. But it's also known for something else: strange sightings. And this one? It's unforgettable. The footage begins when the man holding the camera lifts it slowly, almost without realizing what he's about to see. That's when it happens.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Through the branches, in the distance, something dark is moving, barely visible at first. Black, broad, still. Hidden behind the thick forest growth. The couple freezes, confused, uncertain. The man whispers to his girlfriend, "Do you think it's a bear?" His voice is unsteady, trying to make sense of what they're seeing. But then, the figure moves. It stands up, and instantly, that uncertainty becomes pure fear.
Does he think it's a bear? You think there's a bear up here next to the deer?
This wasn't a bear. This thing was tall, massive even, clearly bipedal, with arms that swung long and heavy. Its motion was smooth, almost practiced, as it rose to full height among the trees. It didn't crawl, it stood. You can hear the woman gasp. And just like that, they run. No second guessing, no final look. They turn, leave everything behind, and sprint straight to the car. The clip ends as fast as it begins, but what it leaves behind are questions that linger to this day. What did they really see out there? Was it Bigfoot, a trick of the shadows, or something much more real? One thing's for sure, their fear was real, their panic unmistakable. So we'll ask you, if it were you in that forest, staring down something that big, that fast, and that close, could you handle that situation? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And stay with us, because sometimes it's not just nature watching you. Something else might be hiding in the trees. This footage comes from Lettuce Lake Park, Florida. It begins quietly. The camera is not steady, focused across the lake. At first, it seems like just another nature video. But then, something moves. Behind the trees, partly hidden by the brush, there's a figure, a large one. It's hard to see clearly at first. The trees and distance blur the shape. But then it shifts, and you can tell. This thing is big, covered in thick, dark fur. The way it moves, it almost looks like it's waiting, maybe trying to cross the water. The man behind the camera doesn't speak. He just keeps filming, locked in place. Zooming in reveals more. Long arms, a bulky frame, a towering height that looks well over 8 feet. Is it a person? A hoax? Some kind of animal? Or is it Bigfoot? We don't know, but even after stabilizing the video, the questions remain. Whatever it is, it's not running, it's not hiding. It's just there, moving slowly, confidently, like it's done this before. Some of the most compelling footage isn't caught with high-end cameras or professional setups. Sometimes, the strangest things are captured by accident, And that's exactly what happened here. The following dashcam footage, posted to YouTube, was reportedly filmed in the Republic of Bashkortostan, a remote and rugged region between Russia's Ural Mountains and the Volga River, near the border of Kazakhstan. This is a land steeped in wilderness, thick forests, mountain ranges, and centuries of folklore. But what you're about to see may turn that folklore into something much more real. The video begins like many late-night road clips. A quiet car ride, headlights cutting through the darkness, and a conversation in Russian between the driver and passengers. There's laughter, casual chatter, but something stands out. The word Yeti can be heard a couple of times, as if they were joking or maybe even hoping to see something. And then, it happens. A blurry shape suddenly darts across the road, right in front of the car, within range of the headlights. It's fast, too fast. The passengers shout in surprise, and the driver hits the brakes. The car jolts to a stop. Just like that, everything changes. The vehicle stalls. The engine cuts out completely. In the dead of night, surrounded by forest and snow, silence takes over. There's a moment, maybe two, of total stillness. Then, the driver restarts the engine. The car inches forward slowly, creeping over where the figure had just passed. You can see the snow disturbed. Whatever crossed the road left tracks. The driver then shifts into reverse, backing up to get a second look. But by now, the figure is gone. The road is empty. The woods are quiet again. Too quiet.
Поехали, поехали, нафиг он нужен, блин. Какой это лось, ты видел, как бежит? Где, как фонарик? Поехали, поехали, потом. Подожди, фонарик. Стой. Вот, смотри, вот.
You can hear the uncertainty in their voices, a mix of disbelief, nervous energy, and genuine fear. And who could blame them? Let's talk about what we just saw. The creature crossed the road in less than 2 seconds, and we're not talking about pavement. This is deep, heavy snow, the kind of terrain that slows down even seasoned hikers. No human, no matter how agile, could move through it at that speed. And then there's the size. Even in the dim light, the figure appears tall, upright, and fast. And it moved with a purpose. This wasn't an animal crawling. It wasn't a man trudging. This was something different, something bigger. Could it have been a hoax? A man in a suit? Maybe. But out there, in one of the coldest, most remote parts of Eurasia, who would be running around dressed as a Yeti at night? In a snowstorm? In the middle of nowhere? It makes no sense. And that's exactly what makes this so compelling. The sighting was short, just a few seconds. But those few seconds raise a lifetime of questions. What if this wasn't just a random encounter? What if what we saw was real? A Yeti, a Bigfoot. Legends say these creatures have roamed high altitudes and frozen forests for centuries. But if that's true, what else might be out there? What else is watching, hiding, waiting, in the snowy dark? We'll let you decide. Watch the clip again, slow it down, examine the frame. Look at the stride, the movement, the reaction from the people in the car. Then ask yourself, what did they really see that night in Bashkortostan? And more importantly, what else are we not seeing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, sometimes the scariest things aren't what you go looking for. It's what finds you. September 2023, somewhere deep in the Alberta wilderness. 2 hunters set up camp east of Banff Park, along the quiet and remote David Thompson corridor. They weren't expecting anything strange. But one night, something moved near their camp. To be safe, they aimed a trail camera toward the site and left it rolling while they were out, and again through the night. What it recorded raised more questions than answers. A steady, silent shot of the camp. Nothing moves. It's calm, almost too calm. The trees rustle slightly. The fire pit is cold. The tent stands still. Minutes pass. Then, in the upper left corner of the screen, something shifts. It's faint at first, hard to make out, but then it steps closer.
There's something to the right. There's something to the right. Over in here.
A large, dark figure, tall, glowing eyes, and covered in the dark. It doesn't run. It doesn't stumble. It moves like it knows where it's going. And then, it's gone, back into the trees, as if it were never there. No sound, no panic, just a silent appearance and a disappearance. Was it a bear, a prank, or something else entirely? They never saw it with their own eyes, but the camera did. And that brief moment, a figure in the dark caught on tape, is all we have. It may not be proof, but it is something. Something that moved. Something that I watched. Something that left no trace behind. What you're about to see isn't blurry. It's not shaky. And it's definitely not fake. This footage comes straight from TikTok, filmed by Emmanuel Alfaro, deep in the wooded wilderness of Oklahoma. And what he captured is anything but normal. The video is short, but powerful, crystal clear and to the point. No filters, no special effects, just a phone, and a moment no one could ever prepare for. The clip begins quietly, trees swaying, light filtering through the canopy, when suddenly something strange comes into view. A figure, massive, still, sitting. It's crouched among the trees. At first glance, you might mistake it for a gorilla. But this isn't a zoo. And this creature? It's different. Its fur is thick, red, and tangled. Its build, broad and strong. And its face? That's what truly chills you. Long, unnatural features, deep-set eyes, and an expression that doesn't feel wild. It feels aware. At first, it doesn't seem to notice Emmanuel. It's just there, watching the woods. But then, slowly, it turns. Its eyes meet the lens. There's no time to think. Then, slowly, it turns. Its eyes meet the lens. There's no time to think. Emmanuel runs. The camera shakes. The forest blurs. Panic sets in. But before the image is lost, we get one last look. The creature is still there. Still staring. Still unafraid. So what did Emmanuel see that day? A man in a suit? A wild animal? Or did he capture a glimpse of something real? One thing's for sure. It didn't run. But he did. Let us know what you think in the comments below. It was October 1967. The dense shadowed woods of Bluff Creek, Northern California, were calm, eerily calm. Two men, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin, were on horseback, winding through the remote forest trails. They weren't just out for a ride. They were hunting for something most people didn't believe existed. Something huge. Something covered in hair. Something people only whispered about. Bigfoot. They had heard stories from local loggers, even cast footprints that were impossible to ignore. But nothing prepared them for what they would soon capture. As they approached a dry riverbed, their horses grew uneasy. And then, Just ahead, it appeared. A large bipedal figure, towering, covered in dark matted hair, was walking along the creek bank. Not running, not hiding, walking, like it belonged there, like they were the intruders.
How far away was she when you first saw her?
Just across the creek, about like from here across the creek. When I first saw her, she was standing upright. I thought, you know, this is unreal.
Patterson leapt off his horse, grabbing his camera in a scramble. His hands were shaking, the ground uneven, but he knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. He hit a record. The resulting footage, though shaky, would become legendary. And in the middle of that short, grainy clip, the creature briefly turns its head toward the camera. That single glance would haunt the world for decades. Bob Gimlin was there. He watched it with his own eyes. And in a recent interview in Fresno, he revisits that day. Not to convince anyone, but to tell it like it was. "I know what I saw," he says, quiet but firm. There's no embellishment, no theatrics, just a man reliving a moment that never left him.
Around where I lived, gee whiz, I was a real outcast. And so, and I had a job and all that, you know, and so even, well, the guys that I worked with, they believed in me and stuff, but the other folks didn't, you know, they just said.
He describes the creature's movements, smooth, heavy-footed, and powerful. Its shoulders were broad, its arms swung wide. It wasn't a man. It wasn't a bear. It was something else, something unclassified. Skeptics have picked apart the footage frame by frame, calling it a hoax, a man in a costume, a stunt. But through all the noise, Bob never changed his story. He never cashed in on fame. He simply stood by what he witnessed. And that, maybe, is what makes his account so unsettling. It's not dramatic. It's real, too real. He speaks softly about the aftermath, how the encounter followed him, not physically but mentally, for years, how some mocked him, how others begged for answers. But Bob didn't chase attention. He stayed quiet for decades because the experience was enough. The Patterson-Gimlin film is just under a minute long, but it's etched into the foundation of cryptozoology. And in that footage, grainy, imperfect, raw, you can feel it. The presence. The weight of something ancient, something to watch. Whether it was a cryptid, an undiscovered primate, or something we'll never understand, Bob Gimlin saw it. And when he says, "I know what I saw," it doesn't sound like a defense. It sounds like a warning.
I know what I saw, and if you've seen the film footage, analyze it and think about it. And don't tell me that they can't exist, and because there's so many people out in the woods all the time that would see one. I'd say, don't even talk to me about that. I said, you know, just think about what you're saying, and if you don't, then that's your ball game.
And so we're left with a question that refuses to go silent. Is Bigfoot merely a legend, born from fear, folklore, and imagination? Or is there something real, something ancient, still roaming our forests, hidden in the shadowed spaces between the trees? What would you do if it wasn't just a story? If you've captured something strange, something you can't explain, send it in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real encounters and chilling evidence from the edge of the unknown. And hit the bell icon so you never miss what the woods might reveal next. The evidence is out there, not in the pages of science fiction, but in the wilderness, etched into snowbanks, recorded in midnight howls, and preserved in frame-by-frame analysis. For every hoax, there are patterns that repeat across continents. For every skeptic, a scientist asking harder questions. And for every whispered denial, a louder truth emerging from the trees. So the next time someone asks you, "Do you believe in Bigfoot?" maybe the better question is, have you looked at the evidence? Because the story of Sasquatch isn't just surviving, it's evolving.